Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll be starting shortly. Hi, everyone. We'll start shortly. Jeff, why don't we go ahead and start? So hi, everyone. My name's Carol Chariot, and I'm the Principal Transportation Planner here at the City of Santa Clara. And welcome to our third round of our community workshops for Pruneridge Avenue Complete Streets Plan. We definitely want you to connect with us on this project. So we have a dedicated webpage where you can go and read all about what's happened in the past with the project, or sign up for any community meetings, or take any online polls that we have for the project. So please make sure and go to that as frequently as you can. We also wanted a way for folks to be able to leave comments regarding the project if you couldn't make any of our community meetings. So you can leave a voicemail at our dedicated phone number for the project, or you can leave an email for our dedicated email address for the project. Next. The agenda for today. So I'll give some brief introductions of staff and consultants working on this project. We also want to give you a brief history of what's been done to date on the project, in case you couldn't make any of our community meetings in the past. We also want to share with you some recommended pedestrian facilities that we would like to do along the corridor. Based on input that we got from the community, either through our online polls or through the community meetings, we were able to revise our corridor concepts. So we wanted to share those with you. And then a good chunk of today will actually be giving you the results of the transportation analysis that we did for the project and the alternatives. And then we also want to go over with you the next steps after we close out these community meetings. And then at the end, we'll have question and answers. But first, please feel free to raise your hand at any time during this meeting, but then we'll actually answer those questions at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. Next. So once again, I'm Carol Chariot, and I'm actually the project manager for this project for the city. I also have with me here today, Michael Liu, our Assistant Public Works Director, and Jonathan Yee, our Transportation Manager. And we also have Alta Planning and Design, who are consultants on this project, helping us to complete the plan. We have Jeff Knowles, we have Ryan Booth, and we have Ben Frazier. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Knowles.
Thanks, Carol, and thanks to everybody that's being here tonight. We've got 44 members of the community with us, and we want to start things off by engaging with you and ask a couple questions. So we've got 2 polls to help us get some information. So if you could go ahead and launch those polls right now, and I'll give folks a few seconds to take them. Great. That is, there we go. So I think the poll should be open now. It should be up on your screen. We're asking folks, where do you live? We're asking if you live directly on Pruneridge, within a few blocks of Pruneridge Avenue, a different area, but still within the city, a neighboring city, or somewhere else. Great, we'll give folks just a few more seconds. We've got now 47 people in the room with us, and we've got 89% of you participating in the poll. So again, get your answers in. We're asking, where do you live in relation to the study corridor? Directly on Pruneridge, within a few blocks, different area, a neighboring city, or somewhere else. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So we got roughly 17% of the room lives directly on Pruneridge Avenue. Welcome. A big majority, 69%, live within a few blocks, so in the neighboring area. 5% are within a different part of Santa Clara. 7% are a neighboring city. Maybe they use Pruneridge Avenue to get to grocery store or get to work. And then somewhere else in the area, 2%. So welcome everyone. We're excited that you're here. Thank you so much. Let's go to poll question number 2. How did you hear about today's meeting? We're asking this question because we want to know how effective we've been in getting the word out. It's been tricky, doing outreach during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we appreciate you all making time out of your schedules to be with us. So how did you hear about tonight's meeting? Did you receive a postcard? We sent out over 7,000 postcards within a half mile of the study corridor. We've posted the information on the city's website and social media. There might have been other social media that notified you about tonight's event, or received an email directly from the city, or maybe another method like through a neighbor. So again, we're taking this information. It helps us keep continually refining it so we can get the word out about this important project. So we'll give folks about 10 more seconds to complete this poll. Okay, great. So I'm going to share the results. So over half the folks received the postcard. So great. I'm glad that that helped you learn about tonight's meeting. 17% through the city's website or social media channels, 5% through other social media, 50% through the City of Santa Clara email, and 17% through other methods. So appreciate that. And again, we're glad that you're here to engage with us. All right. So I want to go through a real brief project history. If you've been with us in previous meetings, this will be a refresher. If you're new to this project, we're excited that you're here. Welcome. Why are we here? The first is this project on Pruneridge Avenue is included in the city's general plan, which guides the city's policies and infrastructure build out. It's also a high priority corridor in both the city and county's bicycle plans. City Council directed staff to pursue the project, and the city applied and received grant funding from Caltrans to produce a complete streets plan. That plan will explore the following things. First, how can the city improve bicycle and pedestrian connections on Pruneridge Avenue? How can the city improve the comfort and safety of all road users? The plan will analyze and summarize traffic, parking, and collision analysis along the corridor, and seek and record community input at multiple points in the process. And so that's not just limited to meetings like tonight. We're having a duplication of this meeting on Saturday afternoon. So if for any reason you need to leave, you can join us again on Saturday afternoon. We've also had multiple surveys and other outreach, citywide outreach efforts. How will decisions be made about the future of Pruneridge Avenue? Community input and data will guide conceptual roadway designs. The plan will then present to council your input, the technical analysis that we're sharing with you tonight, the corridor improvements that meet the goals of the plan, and then city council will decide if and how the plan moves forward. Just as a reminder, I think we said this before, but there is no funding dedicated to any future design or construction of any of the options I'm sharing with you tonight. So this is very preliminary on, it's very early, it's a visioning exercise. We're here just to collect your information, get your feedback, about these conceptual future visions, see which one works with the most community input and also meets the goals of the plan. The Pruneridge Avenue Complete Street Study is studying a 2.2-mile section of Pruneridge with the neighboring connections in West Heading in San Jose and Apple Park in Cupertino. Pruneridge is a minor arterial street near the southern portion of Santa Clara. It's less than a mile from the Apple's headquarters, so a major employer in the region. It's also only 0.3 miles to Santana Row, a major retail, shopping, and restaurant destination. So Pruneridge becomes an important connector road for vehicles, people walking and bicycling. Where are we in the project? So last winter, we kicked off by doing a lot of information gathering, a lot of community surveying, and we had our first 2 community workshops. Over the spring and summer, we started to develop and share out roadway concepts. We shared our first round of that last summer with 2 additional community workshops. Here we are tonight, where we've revised those roadway concepts with some additional understanding of pedestrian or walking condition improvements, and run analysis on these 4 concepts, which we're excited to share out tonight. And then where do we go from here? This spring, we'll be revising those and putting them into a public draft plan for, again, the public to review, and then taking that to City Council. Some of the activities we completed to date are phase 1 community engagement, sending out postcards, holding those workshops, conducting a very well-received online survey, meeting with the BPAC, which is your Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and holding stakeholder meetings with local businesses and civic groups along the corridor. We developed our draft corridor concepts. We shared those at the phase 2 community engagement. We collected existing conceptual roadway analysis, and then we'll go into those tonight about parking and congestion and traffic stress. We've refined the corridor concepts based off of the analysis and the public input. And then we presented that to the BPAC recently to get their additional input. So we heard from a lot of different sources, and this is a kind of a fun way that we asked at earlier outreach meetings to kind of ask people about their experiences on Pruneridge today. And so the larger the word in this word cloud means the more people said that word when we asked them kind of define, pick a word or 2 that really defines what people think of on Pruneridge today. So this is by no means the only way that we've collected input, but I think this kind of explains what most people define as their experience on Pruneridge, that it's busy, there's a lot of traffic, it's fast. Some people feel unsafe, it's wide. There's a lot of great words in here that describe how people experience today. And then we also asked how people want to experience Pruneridge in the future. What are the things that really would make this street special for residents, near neighbors, and city at large? Some people said bike lanes, making it safer. Some people said keep it unchanged, safety. I think changing traffic, all of those factor into the themes that we heard that we really picked out. These are the things that came through really loud and clear. First, we heard a real desire to calm traffic speeds, that particularly in the non-rush hour periods where there's not as much cars on the street, that people are moving at high rates of speed. So it feels uncomfortable if you're out there walking or trying to bicycle, or just a resident walking in your front yard. Reduce traffic congestion. We heard that also very loud and clear as a concern, that especially at the morning and the evening rush, particularly around San Tomas Expressway, that it becomes quite backed up. So they wanted to find ways to alleviate that. We've heard also desire to improve bicycle options and improve walking conditions. And then finally, we heard in our first 2 rounds of community workshops, the desire to preserve as much on-street parking for residents as possible. So to walk through some of the pedestrian improvements that we've come up with. There's a couple different tools in our toolbox that come directly from the city's pedestrian master plan, which looked comprehensively across the city at ways to make it easier and more convenient and comfortable for people to walk. Some of those tools include a pedestrian crossing sign, standard crossing markings that go at intersections, advanced yield lines, which are these 3 triangles here. That tells the car where to stop in advance of a crosswalk, along with stop lines. Identifying new areas for ADA compliant curb ramps so that people who are in wheelchairs or other mobility devices, or even strollers or walkers, can get up and down off the crosswalk safely. curb radius reduction, which is a fancy way of saying removing some of the sweeping turns that allows drivers to go really fast around corners. And so this is bringing out those curb extensions. It also reduces the amount of exposure pedestrians have crossing the street. They're also more visible, so it's an added safety benefit for people walking along with driving. Improving the right turn slip lane. This is true at Saratoga and at San Tomas Expressway, where you have these free right turns where they don't need to stop at a signal and they can make the turn. There are ways to make this and design this so it's safer for pedestrians making their crossing. We evaluated locations where we could add countdown timers and accessible pedestrian signals so that people who have visual impairments can hear when it's safe to cross the street, and also identifying some traffic study locations to collect information and make a determination about new stop signs or new signals at some of the intersections. So I'm not going to go into every single intersection here. This information will be posted on the city's project website. So that will come after this meeting. This slide deck, this presentation will be available. So you can go into more detail and pick out your intersection that you care about and see what's being proposed there. But just so you can see, we've gone through really every major intersection along this corridor to evaluate what would be a good fit for crossing the minor streets and also areas where we can cross Pruneridge. So these icons and the labels below them correspond to the tools that I just talked about. You can see at Redwood Avenue, a new traffic study to evaluate possibly a stop and always stop there. At San Tomas Expressway, this one you can see new signage, new improved right turn slip lanes. This one will require coordination with Santa Clara County as they control the traffic operations, the signals, along with all of the infrastructure that's there in the road. Moving further to the east, as we get into the portions of the street around Henry Avenue, the south side of Pruneridge Avenue is actually within the city of San Jose jurisdiction. So anything there would also need to be coordinated with your neighbors in San Jose. And there again at Winchester, making some ADA curb improvements, curb radius reductions that we've got those on most of the intersections along with a right turn slip lane. So again, if you've got additional thoughts about this in the Q&A session, we'd love to hear your feedback. If you want time to review these, go ahead and take that time and then let us know by leaving us a voicemail message, sending us an email, or completing the survey. So the corridor concepts, this is something that's been presented before, and we're back again to share with you some of the updates. So at the last round of community workshops, we heard that concerns about pulling in and out of driveways, a lot of residents were confused maybe by the concepts and wanted a little more clarification. So what we've done is we've added driveway sightline buffers, which is, I'll get this a second to show you an example of this, but this is where we pull back some of the on-street parking to create more visibility between motor vehicle traffic on Pruneridge Avenue and people getting in and out of the driveway. So it gives them a little bit more a line of sight to see where there's a gap in traffic. What else did we hear? It's unclear where trash receptacles should be located. So we made it, hopefully made it more clear, identifying specifically where those trash pickup areas could be located on these concepts. So if it's been a few months and you don't recall exactly what's being proposed, I wanted to walk through these 4 concepts with you again. The first concept is your existing conditions. This is what would happen if the city decided to do nothing and leave the street as it is. What you have are 2 travel lanes in each direction. You've got an 8-foot wide parking lane, on-street parking, parallel parking, and a 5-foot sidewalk. Concept 1 that we came up with is called the 4-lane option. This is really about narrowing travel lanes. As you can see in your existing conditions, your travel lanes are 12 feet wide. We've narrowed those down to your inside lanes going to 11 feet and your outside lanes being 10 feet wide. That plus the removal of on-street parking on one side of the street allows for a buffered bicycle lane, a 5-foot wide bicycle lane with a 2-foot painted buffer. So it's just paint on the ground to fit into this configuration. You'll also see at the intersections here, we've got some curb extensions to, again, make it easier for pedestrians, give them more visibility for crossing, slowing down cars making the turns there. The driveway buffers. So you can see here, we've added these painted corners, around driveways. It's really about the half a distance of a parking space, which we think adds a lot of benefit for the return. And so that's what we're proposing here as a new additional benefit to this design. And trash bin locations. On the one side of the street, we haven't picked, there's no decision about which side of the street would have their parking relocated, but on one side of the street, trash bin location could happen on the sidewalk, and then on the other side of the street, it could be in these driveway buffer areas. Concept 2, this is a road reconstruction concept. It not only narrows the travel lanes, but it takes your 4 lanes down to 3, 1 lane in each direction and a center turn lane. This has some benefits for traffic calming, also has some benefits for people getting in and out of their driveways. So instead of turning across 2 lanes of traffic to get into their driveway, you can now only need to cross 1 travel lane to get in and out. It also frees up space to preserve parking on both sides of the street and fit in those buffered bike lanes, 5 feet wide with 2-foot painted buffer. Again, in those driveway sightline buffers, you can see areas where the trash receptacles could be located. And so this concept carries forward from the one previously. And then our third concept, the fourth option, is what we call parking protected option. So it's just like that concept 2. The difference here is that the parking is preserved, but it's swapped with the bicycle lane. So in this scenario, you have a sidewalk, then you have your bicycle lane adjacent to the sidewalk, and then you've got a buffer, and then you've got your parking that's floating next to that buffer there. And so this gives the bicyclists an added level of comfort, having a physical barrier between them and speeding traffic. So under this scenario, again, the driveway buffer is located adjacent to the parking lane, and trash bin locations could be located in those sightline buffer areas. So what does all of this mean in terms of impacts to people driving and bicycling and walking on the corridor? So we've done a couple things. We've gone through analysis looking at speed and safety. We've looked at parking, and we've looked at traffic. So I want to go through these in a little more detail. The first is speed and safety analysis. So we looked at the reported collisions along the corridor over the past 5 years. And this is when we did the analysis, these are the most recent 5 years that we had collected. There was one fatal collision between a car and a motorcycle on Saratoga and Pruneridge. There was one collision with severe injuries, which means typically requiring going to the hospital, and that was a pedestrian, someone walking near Kylie and Pruneridge, and then 13 collisions with visible injuries. And those you can see in blue on this map here, scattered throughout the corridor. So we know that there are people facing some of these collisions that result in injury, and something that we want to address. One of the major contributing factors to collisions are high rates of speed. And so the city has posted speed limit of 35 miles per hour on Pruneridge Avenue through the whole length of the corridor. We collected data about travel speeds in February of 2021. During this time, there was a shelter-in-place order. And so what we know about that is that there were relatively low volumes of traffic on the corridor. And we also saw nationally higher rates of speed. And so this information should be taken with that grain of salt, that understanding that people without a lot of cars on the road were speeding at higher rates. So the data that we collected tells us that 44% of drivers were exceeding the 35 mile per hour speed limit, but that 85th percentile speed, so the majority of people out there are not going above 39 miles per hour. So you might have an occasional speeder that's going 45, 50 miles per hour, but the majority of folks are within that 35, 39 mile per hour range. From Kylie to Saratoga, 39% of drivers are going above the speed limit, but again, the majority are not maxing out more than 40 miles per hour. The area where we see the most folks speeding is really between Saratoga and Winchester. This is the section that has the fewest number of intersection stop controls or signals. 57% of drivers were going above the speed limit when we collected this data, and 85% of them were around 41 miles per hour. So this, I think, confirms what we've heard from residents who live on or near Pruneridge, that they do experience and see people moving at higher rates of speed. We also know a couple things about what can be done in terms of lane narrowing, so the concepts in general. So with your node build option, there are no additional features that can address safety or through potential collision reduction or speed reduction. There are some concepts I wanted to highlight in the 3 concepts. The first is lane narrowing that I mentioned before in your 4-lane option. We don't have any data about what lane narrowing does for collision reduction, so making it safer, but we do know from literature, from national research, that just narrowing a travel lane from 12 to 11 or 12 to 10 feet can relate to a 1 to up to 6 miles per hour slower speeds. And that's without changing your speed limits. That's without getting police officers out there to write tickets. That's just a design change that can benefit that concept. For 2-lane option, you get the lane narrowing and the reconfiguration. The reconfiguration has been studied quite a bit over the last 30 years. And the Federal Highway Administration tells us through all the literature review that they've done that streets that have this reconfiguration going from 4 lanes down to 3 lanes see between a 19 and 47% reduction in crashes. We also know that from that lane narrowing, we can see between a 3 and 6 mile per hour slowing of speeds. And then for concept 3, the parking protected option, you get the lane narrowing, the reconfiguration, and that bicycle protection. So these are the same numbers as concept 2. The bicycle protection, since this is a relatively new concept, there's still being research done about how much more effective the protected bikeway option is for reducing collisions between motor vehicles and people bicycling. But these are the numbers about speed and safety. We also went and evaluated the pre and post collisions. So what happened before and after road reconstruction happened on either side of Pruneridge. So before, this is what it looked like before 2011, when the city reconfigured Pruneridge between Tantau and Pomeroy. It's 2 lanes in each direction. This is a very similar configuration of what you see on Pruneridge today between Pomeroy and Winchester. After the road reconfiguration went in, the collisions were reduced by 15%. And I will say that before, we saw, I believe, 2 pedestrians in the 2 years before the analysis was conducted, and then no pedestrian collisions afterwards. So these 15% collision reduction here on this side. We also looked what happened in San Jose when they reconfigured their road. This is before 2017. The 2 years before, we collected information, and then the years after, the city of San Jose has reported a 33% reduction in collisions attributed to this change in the way that the road is designed. Okay, parking analysis. So the consultant team conducted parking counts along both sides of Pruneridge Avenue, from and including Pomeroy all the way to Winchester. We collected these counts on Tuesday, March 9th through Saturday, March 13th of 2021. Data collection was obtained during the shelter in place, and therefore we believe this should reflect the maximum number of residents needing to park along these roadways. When you're not going into the office as much, we think that we have a better representation of your maximum desire or need for on-street parking. We did block-long counts also along all of the side streets that face Pruneridge Avenue. We did these on 3 consecutive weekdays during 3 different times per day. So we collected counts of on-street parking between 7 and 9 a.m. to capture your daytime parking needs, between 11 and 2 to capture midday parking needs, and also went out in the wee hours of 2 to 4 a.m. to capture overnight parking needs. We repeated counts as well on a Saturday during the morning between 11 and 2, and also between 5 and 8. So the data I'm presenting shows the average utilization across those time periods. We also have some detailed maps that I'll get into. So the analysis results showed that on the north side, there are 220 available parking spaces, but on average, we observed only 43 vehicles needing those spaces. So a utilization rate of around 19%. South side of Pruneridge, there are 233 available spaces. We observed on average 38. with 16%. So your average is around 18%, which means that on a typical block, there are usually around 8 out of the 10 parking spaces available. A little more detail here. In blue, we've categorized those segments, both the side streets and on either side of Pruneridge. The navy color means that over half of that block has parking spaces available. Your lighter blue is 30 to 49.9%. Yellow is between 15 and 30%, and then heavily utilized would be less than 15% available. So an example would be from Radcliffe to Woodhams. On average, 5 out of the 36 available spaces are used. It gets a little bit more parked up in front of some of the multifamily apartment complex between Saratoga and Herald and Cypress. 17 of 28 spaces are typically used. And then there's a small strip mall, and I think there's bar and dry cleaners. There's 12 to 15 spaces typically used between Saratoga and Herald. So in concept one, as I mentioned before, would require for that configuration to require removing parking on one side of the street. So we also play these numbers out. If you remove parking and consolidated on the north side of Pruneridge, so if you took it off from the south and moved to the north side, drivers would need to either park across the street or the nearest side street, or maybe move one block down. So even if you did that, on a typical block, there would still be 6 out of 10 parking spaces available. If parking were consolidated to the south side, if the north side were removed, then those spaces would be taken up, and still you'd see around 35% estimated utilization, or 6 out of 10 spaces available. Traffic analysis, which I think is where a lot of folks are excited to hear the results. I want to walk through our process because I think it's important to understand how we arrived at some of this information. We started our traffic analysis by collecting turning movements or intersection counts for people bicycling, people walking, and people driving at 25 locations on a midweek day in February of 2021. Intersections are scored using a level of service rating that's from A through F. An A score, a score of A or B typically means the road is overbuilt, but cars can cruise with little delay. A score of B, C, or D is the right balance between the roadway lanes, the signals, and the acceptable levels of normal delay. The city's general plan says that intersections should be designed to operate at levels A through D. And E is also acceptable at San Tomas Expressway due to the high volumes of that surface expressway. Scores of E and F symbolize the level of delay that most people would find aggravating. The city has historical counts from the past 2 years, pre-COVID, so in 2018 and 2019, for 8 out of the 25 study intersections. Along Pruneridge Avenue, historical counts are available at all 4 major intersections at Kiley, San Tomas, Saratoga, and Winchester. What we did was we compared the historical counts to the 2021 counts to show a traffic volume in the study area that are currently lower than they are today. So I'm going to go into that process a little bit in more detail. So these are the 25 study locations. There were 12 along Pruneridge Avenue. And as I mentioned before, 4 of those counts included information that we had before COVID. We took information at 5 of the intersection of Forbes, 5 on Homestead, and 3 on Mauricia. We knew that we need to adjust for COVID. We knew that COVID counts that we took would be lower than normal. And so we collected these counts in February at those 25 locations. We compared them to the historical count information that we had. Then we created an adjustment factor based off the information that we had. And increased our February 21 counts to pre-COVID levels for all of the 25 locations. So here are those 8 historical counts that we did. We compared them to the counts that we took during COVID, and we saw that on an average in the AM peak hour, those counts that we took during COVID were 63% lower than what we would typically expect in the time period right before COVID. And then in the afternoon, the evening peak hour, we saw those numbers 42% lower than what we would anticipate. And so these are the numbers we used to crank up the numbers that we collected in 2021. And so that's the numbers that we used to analyze what we think that these concepts would do in terms of traffic. So traffic conditions today. Right now, and again, the no build option is your current conditions. Right now, there are 24 out of the 25 intersections that are operating at acceptable operational standards based off the city's general plan. The one that doesn't operate currently at that standard is San Tomas Expressway, excuse me. In concept one, as this would not change any of the road configuration related to those operations, the same numbers would be true. For concepts 2 and 3, currently 20 would operate acceptably and 5 would not. So under concepts 2 and 3, you have San Tomas, plus you have Kiley and Pruneridge, Tan Oak and Pruneridge, Saratoga and Pruneridge, and Cypress and Pruneridge. All of those intersections would currently not meet the city's operational goals. And so this is a map showing what those look like. In green are A through C. D is in yellow. It's kind of in the, still operating at the city's goals, but approaching the danger zone of E and F of those areas that don't meet the goals. So this is today, the no build option in the morning rush hour. And this is what options 2 or 3, again, the 2-lane option or the parking protected. You can see those additional delay affecting Kiley, Saratoga, and Cypress. In the evening, this is how it operates today. Again, San Tomas is the one where you're having that E and F rating, and you have some operating at D, at Saratoga, at Tan Oak, and at Winchester on Pruneridge, along with some issues up on Homestead, still at D. And in the evening, not as much disruption, but still operating poorly at Tan Oak and at Kiley, excuse me. We also look out into 2030. So we know that traffic counts will most likely increase with new development the city has approved and also developments that are planned. So this model contains future land uses approved up to 2030. And we saw an increase of 18% traffic over today. So what would that mean in terms of these concepts? So your no build option or your 4-lane option in 2030 would see 22 intersections operating acceptably, and then 3 would have issues. And those 3 would be San Tomas, additionally Pomeroy and Homestead, and Kiley and Homestead. If concepts 2 and 3 were selected, under this scenario, the analysis shows that 17 would operate acceptably and 8 would have issues. And those additional 5, in addition to San Tomas and Pruneridge, Pomeroy and Homestead, and Kiley and Homestead, would be Kiley and Pruneridge, Tan Oak and Pruneridge, Saratoga and Pruneridge, Cypress and Pruneridge, and San Tomas and Forbes, not meeting those minimum desired goals. So again, in 2030, under your existing conditions, if nothing changed, or if you went with concept 1, you can see issues on Saratoga, Saratoga and Kiley, and with letter D, and then some of those issues on San Tomas Expressway. In the evening, you can see those also changing to E and F at Saratoga, Cypress, San Tomas, and at Kiley. In the evening, under no build conditions, this would continue today, or concept 1, you'd still see it operating kind of as you do today, except for San Tomas. And then in the evening, under concepts 2 and 3, additional disruption at Kiley, Tan Oak, San Tomas Expressway. In addition to those intersections, and that's the level of delay that you might have moving through those intersections, we also looked and calculated and modeled how long would it take to travel along the whole length of the corridor. We looked at your morning westbound peak time direction and also your evening eastbound, which is your peak direction. We calculated travel time in minutes and also compared that to the level of service along the roadway. So those are similar to those scores that I showed before about what would be acceptable along those corridors. And so your travel time in minutes right now is around 8.2 minutes under the no build and concept 1 option in the morning, and it takes a little bit longer to travel the corridor in the evening, 10.8 minutes. LOS scores of D and E. Concepts 2 and 3 would see a 37% increase, and for the evening and in the morning would see a 105% increase to 16.8 minutes, putting it at an LOS of F for both of those. So pretty significant additional delay for those two options in terms of travel time. And again, those numbers are in 2030. We also heard from neighbors about neighborhood traffic diversion, and so we had analyzed that as well. So this as well is looking at 2030 at the AM peak, and what this map shows are the corridor segments where we could see people that are driving diverting from Pruneridge onto different streets to get to their destinations. And so we've modeled this, looking at all the different permutations that people could take to get to multiple different destinations. And in blue, you see a decrease in traffic volume. The thick blue line is a decrease of over 300 vehicles per hour. And this again is your peak time period. And then going down from there all the way down to decrease in 50 to 100 vehicles per hour is the thinnest line that you see. The orange line is an increase in traffic diverting from Pruneridge to other streets. And you can see here, the majority of diversion would either be people staying on San Tomas Expressway to exit at different locations or going down to Stevens Creek Boulevard. Those are the two areas where you see it in the morning. There could be as well small diversion to side streets, less than 50 vehicles per hour, which is not mapped here. That 50 vehicles per hour would be less than one new additional driver per minute. So we think that would be almost imperceptible. But that's shown here for AM. And then PM, looking that direction in 2030, you can see here the folks that would be diverting from Pruneridge. Again, many of them would go down to Stevens Creek Boulevard or potentially stay on San Tomas. We also would probably see an additional traffic on Los Padres Boulevard in the 50 to 100 additional vehicles per hour. So I know I've shared a lot of data with you. It kind of can make your head spin a little bit. We tried to share some of the results of this analysis. So if you're thinking about level of service, about delay, about how much time it takes to get through an intersection, there are 3 intersections that have poor standards for the no build and 4-lane option in 2030, and 8 for concepts 2 and 3. If it's travel time that you care about, the average time, so morning and afternoon, if you were trying to get this together and average them out during your PM and AM rush periods, is 9 minutes and 30 seconds versus 15 minutes and 45 seconds. And then your diversion. The streets that have more than 100 cars diverted for options 1 and no build and concept 1 are none. And there are only 2 streets that have more than 100 cars diverted in 2030, and that's San Tomas and Stevens Creek. We also looked at something called vehicle miles traveled. The city is interested in now calculating at a citywide level how many vehicles are moving along its roadways. So this is also calculated here. We saw a very small reduction in vehicle miles traveled. This is based off some of that diversion that I just shared with you about people taking possibly more efficient routes to get home and reduce the miles they would drive between locations. And these numbers do not account for shifting some of those vehicle trips to bicycling or to walking. In order to do that, we'd have to look a little bit beyond the city's boundaries and beyond these 25 intersections. And so that would require a little bit more multi-municipal study to figure out that shift. So in summary, and then we're going to get into one last poll, and then I want to hear your feedback and get your questions. Going back to some of those major themes at the outset of this project about how we should score and think about these concepts. First one is reducing speed and improving safety. Which concepts do that? The no build option currently operates as it does. There are not any safety improvements for reducing speed or improving the safety. You get that with the 4-lane option, the 2-lane option, and the parking protected option. In terms of preserving on-street parking, the no build option preserves on-street parking, as does the 2-lane and the parking protected options. There will be some parking removal needed for those sightline buffers for people's driveways, but certainly it will preserve the majority of it. Minimizing additional congestion. Really, the only two options that minimize additional congestion are the no-build option and the 4-lane option. And then producing opportunities for more walking and bicycling. You get that with the concepts 1, 2, and 3. So I want to walk through these just one more time, just to give a refresher in people's mind, because we're going to go to our third poll and ask you to provide some feedback to us. So as a reminder, your 4-lane configuration right here, existing conditions, the themes for this one are you do preserve your on-street parking. It also has the least impact to congestion. Your concept 1 is your 4-lane option. This is the way that you can fit in bicycle facilities, improving pedestrian conditions at the intersections, but it would require the removal of on-street parking on one side. Your road reconfiguration, going to a 2-lane option, preserves parking on both sides and allows for the inclusion of a buffered bicycle lane. And then concept 3, the parking protected option, calms traffic speeds, preserves parking, and creates a more comfortable bicycle option. So with that, I'd like to open the poll and ask folks that are on the call. We now have up to 55 folks in the room with us, so thank you again for being here tonight. Based off this information, we'd love to get a quick snap poll, an understanding of where people think they are with these 4 options. So we're asking people to rank it in preference. So what's your top preference? What's your second preference, third, and fourth? So we'll go ahead and let folks take a second to go through that, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So we'll give folks maybe 20 or so seconds just to kind of sort through their answers and think about it while I take a sip of water. All right, we're seeing 60% participation, 61%. We'll keep it open for another 20 or 30 seconds. I want to make sure that people have time to really think through these and participate if you're willing to do so. Again, we'll be sharing this information with City Council. It'll be part of the plan, and we'll be documenting it. Again, there will be a survey that goes on after this, so don't feel like you're locked in here. There may be some questions you have, maybe some feedback you want to provide. This is not certainly the final opportunity to provide your thoughts or your input, but it just gives us a situation to take the pulse of the community. And again, your first option, the one that you like the most, second option, the one you like the second most, and third, and then fourth option, the one that you least prefer. So we're asking you, what's your top preference here? 1 through 4. All right, we have 100% of the folks on the line have answered. I'm gonna go ahead and close that poll then, and we can share the results out, see where this group feels we should be heading. All right, so the no build existing conditions option, you can see here, looks like the majority of folks put it their fourth preference here, with strong showing in first, and then kind of equal understanding of second and third preference. The concept 1, your 4-lane option, very strong third ranking, but also very strong for first and second preference. Looks like the leader right now is concept 2, the 2-lane option. Lots of first and second preferences, followed by a third, and then the concept 3, the parking protected, a little less popular first and second as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that, and we'll move on to just share with you our next steps.
Jeff, I don't know if we could see the polling results.
Oh, sorry, is it Is it being shared right now?
I don't see it.
Well, if folks don't see it, we will make sure that it gets included, the results get included with the slide presentation once that's published on the city's website. And if you have questions in the Q&A, you can let me know. We can get back to that as well. Okay. All right, thanks everybody for participating in that poll. We'll go ahead and close the poll and wrap up. So where are we going from here? We have a council study session on March 8th that's scheduled. So if you'd like to attend that, you're more than willing to do so. We'll be sharing some of the same results that we shared tonight. We'll be also identifying recommendations to address some of the signal and transportation deficiencies that we called out. We know that those intersections that are not meeting the city's goals need to be looked at more closely. And so we'll be working with city staff to come up with some ideas about how to mitigate that delay and maybe reduce that. We're developing cost estimates so that we can give city council a clear understanding of how much each of these concepts would cost. We'll be putting that into a draft plan and releasing that this spring. And then we'll be revising it based off of public input we get from council and from different stakeholder groups. And then we'll be going back to council this summer for them to receive this information and then make a decision about where to go. Again, we want you to be involved and stay involved with us. So stay tuned. There'll be a survey posted on the project website. We'll also make sure that if you've registered, that you get an email about that survey when it's live. You can always send us an email, survey@pruneridgeavplan@altago.com. Call and leave us a voicemail. If email is not your thing, go ahead and leave us a voicemail at this voicemail number and attend future city council meetings. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Carol Shariat at the city to entertain questions. If you've got questions that you want to have answered, or if you'd like to provide some feedback, we've got time now that we can hear those. Hopefully, we've got a lot of folks here. We want to make sure that we make time for everyone. So go ahead and at this point, you can raise your hand, which should be at the bottom of your screen, to go ahead and indicate if you'd like to have an opportunity to speak.
And I just want to reiterate, if you didn't happen to see the poll come up on your computer, that online survey that Jeff was talking about, we'll post it on the project's webpage, and you can rank your choices for the concepts there as well. So don't feel like this is the only time and place that you can make choices.
Great, thanks, Carol. All right, folks, we've got 51 members of the public in the room. Thanks again for being here tonight. Let's start with somebody who's identified themselves as M, initials M and S. I'm going to allow you to go ahead and unmute and go ahead and share your question or your feedback with us.
Hi, my questions, I've got like 3 different points that I'd like to make. Has a city evaluated about roundabouts for the streets that have lights that aren't busy, meaning you keep Pruneridge and St. Thomas, Pruneridge and Lawrence Expressway and Pruneridge and Winchester as lights, and all the other areas where there are currently lights that you do the roundabout to slow that traffic down? That's my first question. Second point is, if we're concerned about pedestrian safety, why would they give the option of closing off parking on one side of the street? Because I've noticed, just because of past behavior within the city, people are not going to walk to the corner to cross the street. They're going to be playing Frogger to get to their home on the other side of the street. And then the other idea is, have they thought about putting speed bumps throughout Pruneridge, just mounds, so it would slow the traffic down on that high speed area in between St. Thomas and Winchester?
Sure. So your first question was about roundabouts and if we would evaluate them. So actually, as part of our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, they actually are very much also interested in roundabouts. And we actually, as city staff, gave a presentation on, what's the difference between roundabouts and traffic circles. So that's something that actually our Bike and Ped Committee are looking at for us as a subcommittee, but then we'll also have to take that information and do our own analysis for that. So we can't say that we've looked at it now, but it is something that we can look at possibly in the future. Definitely in terms of, we're very much concerned about pedestrian safety, and that's why we had done that analysis all along the corridor as to what type of improvements we could do at some of these locations along Pruneridge. And, we really looked at what type of improvements did we originally propose as part of our pedestrian master plan, and wanted to consider it here as well along Pruneridge. And then finally, in terms of speed bumps, really, we can't do any type of like speed bumps or speed humps on any type of, say, collector street or arterial street. We can only do it along a residential roadway. So definitely we would look at that along, certain residential roadways. Hopefully that addresses some of your comments.
Thank you very much. The next person that's up that has their hand raised is Diane Harrison. Before we unmute for Diane, just folks, if you also want to provide typed questions, you can do that in the Q&A window. We have staff that are answering them, and we will also address some of those in the Q&A. So we'll get a few folks that are on the line to talk, and then we'll go to some of the things in the Q&A box. So I just want to make sure folks are aware of that. So Diane Harrison, you're up. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to give your feedback or ask your questions. Go ahead.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I had several things, but I just the last person talking about roundabouts. I happen to be on the roundabout subcommittee, and so I would encourage you to contact us. I'll give you my email, since I can't put it in the chat. It's dianeliz1@yahoo.com. Feel free, and we can talk more about some of the work we've been doing and some of the places we've been looking at and all that. But the main thing I wanted to talk about is the so-called protected bike lanes. That sounds good, but the reality is they aren't nearly as well protected as they sound like they might be. I've ridden in some of the ones in San Jose and elsewhere. I've seen them being used as motorcycle parking. I think in the city of Santa Clara, I think we're going to, in spite of any education that they are promising, I'm pretty sure we're going to see trash cans in them. In fact, actually, I think in option 1, I think the trash cans will also be in the bike lane. Cleanup campaign items, because it's right by the curb, leaves, debris. Since the parking is on the other side, passenger car doors, most kids particularly, or any passengers, don't usually look before they open their door, and you're kind of stuck. You have nowhere to go when they open doors. So it's, and then people pulling out of driveways. We're talking a little bit about the visibility. They need to get beyond the parked cars to see traffic coming both ways. So what happens is some part of that car is going to be blocking the bike lane. So there's a lot of problems with those so-called protected bike lanes, particularly on a busy street like Pruneridge. So that's why I particularly voted for concept 2 over concept 3. And then the last thing is for the future, all those projections for 2030, we're also working, and I've been to some of those meetings, on the climate situation. There's a climate action plan in the city, and it seems like any talk about projecting traffic should be paired with the climate programs and how we are trying to reduce the number of cars. Whereas this analysis sort of assumes that the number of cars will increase. Also, I know a lot of people have gotten used to working from home, and a lot of companies are being encouraged to continue that practice. The more people who work from home, the fewer cars are out there commuting. So I don't think that it is necessarily the case that all those projections of doom and gloom for 2030 are necessarily going to happen if we start to think about other options for commuting. Is there anything else? One thing that did come up also in the VPAC is that the option one, you don't want to switch sides, because evidently that was done on Wolf and it doesn't work very well. People get really confused. So if you're going to close parking on one side, it has to be consistent throughout the length of Pruneridge. Although, like I said, I still prefer option two. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback, Diane.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Diane.
being here. All right, the next person with a hand raised, and then we'll go to some of the Q&A in the window. The next person up is Ruben Fong, and then after that, we'll go to the Q&A. So Ruben, I'm going to unmute you and go ahead and ask your question or provide your feedback. Ruben, are you, we're having trouble hearing you. Okay, Ruben, I'm sorry, we're not hearing you through your mic. Maybe ask the question that you had or share the feedback in the Q&A window. We can circle back with you as well. I'm going to go ahead and circle back, and you can raise your hand again if you get that mic issue worked out. Apologies there. Let's go ahead next to Tessa. Tessa, you're up. Go ahead and share your comment or your feedback.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, thank you. You are doing an amazing job. I'm just so impressed. I live in San Jose, but I had a girlfriend who lived on Pruneridge. And, I saw, I would ride my bike because that's all I do, because I'm a climate activist. And I'm Tessa Woodmansee. And so basically, I just think you're just doing an amazing job. In terms of comparing it to San Jose, because I live on Stockton Avenue, and it's a similar type of street with a lot of fast traffic and things like that, problems on the corners. The one question I had was like how you deal with the driveways, because when I was advocating with VTA for their what they called the Foresee the Future, it was part of their the BRT program that was going to run all the way down El Camino from East San Jose to Palo Alto. Anyway, the thing was, my husband and my daughter were riding on El Camino to go to work on their bicycles, and I did it too. And it's those driveways that cause problems as they come out. And how do we solve that problem? And I was just wondering about that design feature that you talk about, like making the driveways safer. So if you want to talk about that, that would be great. And how it's designed, because I wasn't sure, I didn't understand how that works, because that's such a risky part of, like, if you're on El Camino, let's say, or even with residential neighborhoods coming out of the driveway. And so how we can create safety in that way. And and also I totally appreciate that you even respond to our comments. That's really great, versus San Jose's policies or whatever happens, just more community engagement. Thank you. And I guess my main comment is why I came to the meeting is that I said, with our climate crisis, which my husband is calling it, he's a climate scientist himself and biologist, that we're going into an era of chaos. And we're seeing it all over, you have, just look up, as they say from the movie. And so, what we're doing going forward, like, we shouldn't even have these meetings, because we really just need to make the changes and, do the best. It was the same issue with what happened at VTA. We spent $10 million to create the BRT program that they try to reduce our greenhouse gases and all the good things they were doing. And following state mandates, which there are state mandates, actually my son, who's running for city council, San Jose as mayor, he's running as mayor, Marshall Woodmansee. And he was just telling me today that Jared Blumenthal of the state is all about, like, no cars. Like, that's one of their options. And Marshall said that's the one he wants, no cars. And, we have to make those changes or we will go extinct. And so that's the place that we're in now. And so how we're going, we have to move faster. And I think making it the safest it can be. And, you know, I've been saying this to VTA, all the Measure B money should be going towards making pedestrian and walkability, because that's how we're going to survive. We have to stop burning fossil fuels, and we have to start living hyper local, growing our own food, becoming producers. That's another whole story. But, you know, it's basically walking and oh, I have to get my phone. You can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
We can hear. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, sweetie. Yeah. My little earset went down, and you're being so patient. Thank you. And just appreciate this time to talk, because that's really important that we, you know, get the public comment. And so, you know, and I just really appreciated Diane Harris, and everything she was saying was very, very important. And so many good points about the unsafety. We really just have to get rid of the cars. And as much as we can, I think banning cars needs to be our philosophy going forward. And we can make small steps. The bigger steps we make, the better, because we're in a climate emergency. That's all we should be thinking about, is that's what you do when you're in an emergency.
Tessa,
Okay.
I hate to cut you off. I appreciate
All
your
right,
comments.
sweetie.
We can
Oh my
circle
God,
back
you're
to you if there are
amazing.
more.
Yes.
I want to give some room for some more folks, but I
Okay,
appreciate you
good.
being
Thank
here
you.
and thank you for your comments. All right, let's go to the Q&A box. Carol, are there questions here that you would like to address live? If so, maybe you could read them out and then make a response.
I can read one out for Carol.
Okay, Jonathan Yee is here from the city of Santa Clara. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Sure. Just one question from an anonymous, but there was a question just about Amazon deliveries and garbage pickup for concepts 2, 3, and 4. Maybe if you could flip to the concepts being considered, just to go over how the deliveries and garbage are not impacted.
Jeff, can you go over that, please?
Carol, you want me to go through that one?
Yeah, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think for how delivery would operate for your current scenario here, excuse me, is that I think for the parking utilization that we shared with you, it should not be an issue finding available on-street parking spaces for deliveries on either side of the street. For this one here, you could see that the issue would be not difficult finding space where there is parking available on one side of the street, but where it's relocated, that vehicle would then need to either go onto the side street to find available parking, 1 block away, but we know that that's probably not how they're going to operate. The other option would be to double park, put on the flashers, and block a travel lane, which is exactly what happens right now with people needing to turn left across 2 lanes, is that they turn their blinker, they wait for there's a room, and it effectively makes that 1 lane inoperable for the cars behind them. But that's not a problem because there's another traffic lane for them to move into. So operationally, I could see delivery trucks either hopefully not blocking the bicycle lane, which they're not supposed to do, but blocking 1 travel lane and allowing cars to move around them. And in this scenario here, this again provides parking again on both sides. So that's available to folks. And then here, the delivery trucks would again take that on-street parking location, again, not blocking the bikeways or the travelways. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay, Jonathan, do you want to take another one from the Q&A window?
Sure. Let me go through this real quick. Sorry. I guess just one question also from anonymous. I can just read it. It says, since the additional congestion and longer transit times are expected from options 3 and 4 would affect many Santa Clara residents who live beyond the Pruneridge corridor, what efforts are being made or will be made to get feedback from a wider audience, which is representative of all of those who will be affected?
So I think, just to get a wider audience and more people, to take, so we can get more information from them. Like I said, we will have online surveys where people can go on and do the ranked choice voting for those concepts. We also try to promote this project through the city's city manager blog, so we consistently write about it. We also just, always post on the webpage whatever new information that we have, or that we've just done a new community meeting. We try to do social media postings through our communications team, usually through Facebook or Nextdoor. So we constantly try to, and we also go out to the public. We've done quite a few pop-up events and gone to like our tree lighting ceremony and our Celebrate Santa Clara event. So we definitely are trying to get the word out about the project and where you can get more information. And definitely, like I said, we do have a dedicated email address and phone number that you can leave your feedback as well, because we're monitoring that.
Great. It's a point well taken. And I don't know if I was clear that we sent out for the first 2 workshops, the second 2 workshops, and then these 2 workshops, 7,000, over 7,300 postcards to every business and residential address within a half a mile of the corridor, which covers those 25 intersections. If you saw that boundary, so from Mauricio up to Homestead. So we hopefully got a good number, but that's a point well taken, that these impacts kind of had far-reaching impacts for the rest of the city and across the neighboring jurisdictions. So good point. All right, let's go to the folks that are callers and get some more questions and some more feedback from them, and then we'll switch back to the Q&A. So again, if folks need to jump off and get on with their evening, we just want to say thank you for being here and taking your time out. We'll stick around to make sure that everybody who would like to have a chance to talk has that opportunity. And we'll be moving on to, let's see, next one is Pratik. Pratik, you're up to talk. Go ahead, share us your question or your comment.
Hi, first of all, thanks a lot for sharing all this detailed analysis. I'm quite impressed kind of looking at both in terms of congestion, bike lanes. This is the first time I'm attending it. And just to kind of give some context, I live at the intersection of Pruneridge and Kylie there. And even today, with the 4 lanes and in COVID situation or post-COVID, the traffic does pile up on that intersection. And be it whatever status, me and my family find it a hard time getting out of the driveway. And nobody gives any way to get out. And sometimes you're waiting for 5 to 10 minutes, waiting for somebody to just make it. And looking at the traffic congestion rates that you're talking about with concept 2 and 3, this is going to be even much more of a problem. And I usually work sitting at the window and I hardly see any bikes, maybe 1 bike a day, maybe over the weekends. So I know we want to make it a complete street, but if you're looking at the street usage, it's primarily cars. And at least I don't see the value add of adding a bike lane just for the sake of adding it, because we have some budget out there.
Thank you for that comment. Any response from city to that?
Yes, definitely. We actually want to make all our streets complete streets, because we do have an adopted complete streets policy where we want to make, the roadway for all users, not just for vehicles. We do understand that there may be, more congestion, or we do understand that, I don't, see very many bicyclists, as you had pointed out, but definitely, as part of our bicycle master plan, this is like the second priority project in there. And definitely we're just trying to, increase the number of bicycle lanes so that we hopefully will see more of a mode shift for people to feel like, there's a more complete bicycle system. So why should I use my car, which may take me longer now if I have, some more complete, bikeways that I can take to work, and maybe it might become faster for you than being in a vehicle. So definitely we understand and hear your concerns, but definitely we would love to make, all the roadways for all types of users, pedestrians and bicyclists and vehicles as well. Thanks,
Carol. Yeah, and I appreciate that feedback. And at Alta, we work in many jurisdictions in the Bay Area and across the country. And it's been certainly our understanding and analysis that roads that are 35 miles per hour and have high volumes, over 10,000 vehicles per day, like Pruneridge, where we're asking bicyclists to share the road with those vehicles and speeds, it's not a really comfortable place to bicycle. And so you don't see a lot of people risking it to go out there and bicycle, but there's maybe a pent up demand that we're not seeing out there. And that's something that the city that Carol, I think, discussed about tapping into. But I appreciate that comment very much. And thank you for being here. The next up to share their feedback or ask a question is Mohammed. Go ahead, Mohammed, you're up next.
Yes, hi. Thanks for accepting my feedback. So I have a couple of points. Some of them may already be shared, but I want to emphasize them. So I want to make sure again that at least that what we call it concept one, when removing one side of the parking street, to me, this will only cause more accident again. I will have to park on the other side of the street. So that means I have to cross that road, wide road. Now I have to worry about bicycle and two-side traffic. I'm not going to go all the way to the nearest traffic just to cross. I get my car from the other side. So I am, strongly against that, just for safety. And specifically, if this is the argument of all of that is safety, this is actually going the wrong way. So that's one. Two, I have to agree with the person who just spoke before me about the bicycles. I mean, I've been living in this street for 11 years now, and I live in Main Street itself, on Pruneridge itself, and I barely see any bicycle. So I understand people, with bicycle rides and all of that, they want that. But again, even a bicycle today is going, and they go in safety. Even the accident that you shared with us before, it was motorcycle, was not even with a bicycle. So if that's excuses to have less accident, again, maybe you should ban the motorcycle, not ban the cars themselves. Again, the other problem is the current status example of what you have as one lane concept, which is today is I think from Pomona all the way to Lawrence. I personally, when I drive my kids to school in the morning, I see crazy traffic. People are using that middle lane to cross other cars because it's a super jam, especially on the rush hour. So again, the safety that we're talking about, we are going against the safety when people getting all jammed, and specifically when you're talking about those narrowing lanes, and you say that even your study said that would add another 8 or 7 minutes or so to that already existing long delay on Pruneridge itself, people will even drive even more unsafely, specifically at rush hour. So again, I am so scared of that adding more accident and not reducing accident. And that can, by the way, also on top of the bicycle, because people on cars who just wanted to avoid traffic, they would just do anything, unfortunately. And you saw them in the morning, specifically in that area that I told you just before Lawrence. Finally, I'm sorry for taking long, but the final point, San Tomas itself, it's higher traffic, and we don't have a pure bicycle lane, but there is a lot of bicycle on the side as well. So I'm just FYI. So I mean, Pruneridge, if anything, would be more safer than San Tomas. Thank you very much for accepting my point.
Maha, thank you very much for being here and appreciate your time. Let's go to the next caller here. I see that's got their hand raised. Alon, go ahead, you're next up.
Hello, thanks again, Jeff and Carol, for doing this and for all the work that you've been doing and for laying it out so nicely here for us tonight. It's been great attending those meetings. And I am not a local resident of Pruneridge. I've been using this as the area as to get through from Sunnyvale to the Santana Row area mainly. And in terms of travel lanes going west-east across this neighborhood, there is a distinct lack of a safe bicycle route through there. So when I bike with my daughter, we take Homestead. That is a high stress area, especially around Keeley. So say between Pomeroy, which is great, to around San Tomas and crossing San Tomas. That's it's high stress till you get to Los Padres, and you can connect back to Pruneridge, to Heading. That's so that it's a long route around that part that comes all the way from the foothills of the East Foothills all the way down to Heading, that has been made safe for bicycles over the past few years. And the only missing piece there to get into Sunnyvale and to the Apple Park is these couple blocks along Pruneridge. Just to put it in perspective as a route for bicycles, what it entails to just be missing those few blocks. And just to respond to our friends here, Parthik and Mohammed, that have voiced the lack of seeing bicycles on that stretch of road. And naturally, of course, if there's no, you can't decide whether to build a bridge across the river if there's no one swimming across, right? You don't count the people swimming. So you can't decide whether a bike lane is necessary on Pruneridge if you just look at the people biking there, because I'm not going to take my daughter biking down Pruneridge while there's no bike lane there. It's scary. So I'm gonna take Homestead or go all the way down to Moore Park, but that's far. So of course there's a lot less people using their bikes, and I'm sure many people choose to drive their cars in the route that I take because there is no good bicycle options. If you provide this good bicycle option, you are going to have less car traffic, and you will definitely see a lot more bike traffic going down Pruneridge, which would be great because it's nice and quiet and will make your street, if you live on Pruneridge, a lot more livable. And maybe you'll see yourself, Mohammed, you'll stop driving your kids to school, and instead you'll let them use the protected bike lane to get to school by themselves actively and be healthier, happier kids. So I hope that's for all of us. We will build good infrastructure that we need there for bicycles. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here, Alon. Thank you for your feedback. Let's go to the last person with their hand raised, and then we can divert some attention back to the Q&A window and see if we can knock a few more of those out before we wrap up for the evening. Let's see, William, you're our last caller. Please go ahead and unmute and share your question or your feedback with us.
Hi, thanks. A couple of things. The number 3 choice, I think it is going to cause drivers and passengers getting in and out of their cars to be in a more dangerous situation, it seems, with the bikes on one side of them and cars immediately on the other side of them. I don't know if you've thought about that. But it sounds like also the last 2 choices are going to pretty much double the time it takes to get from one end to the other. And it seems like that's going to force more people to look to side streets like Forbes and maybe Mauricia. And that seems more dangerous to me than having the cars on a main arterial street like Pruneridge. And I don't know, I know you did some study on that, but I'm really surprised that you didn't show more people going down those 2 streets when it doubles the time it takes to drive that section of Pruneridge. And the last thing I'll say, and I've said this at the previous meetings, and I pretty much know that you're going to say it's not part of this project, but it really would make a lot of sense to put money into working with San Jose, Cupertino, and the county to synchronize the traffic signals on Stevens Creek Boulevard. People use Pruneridge because you can't move on Stevens Creek Boulevard during commute times. it would just make sense to put some effort into that. And if you can tell me who I need to contact in the city to ask them to do that, I'd be glad to make the contacts.
Thank you, William. Let's see if Carol wants to possibly respond to that question.
Yeah, so I think, William, you're just trying to see if you can get a contact to talk about like our traffic signals and how they're coordinated.
Sorry, I need to specifically on Stevens Creek. How do you?
Yes.
He's interested in. I believe, William, you go ahead and restate it if I get it wrong. But how he's interested in figuring out a way to have jurisdictions work together to synchronize lights on Stevens Creek Boulevard.
Correct, because if you drive on El Camino, you can go 40 miles an hour pretty much the whole way and maybe only hit one or two lights. If you do that, try to do that on Stevens Creek Boulevard, you're stopping at virtually every other light, if not every light, during commute times. Investing in synchronizing that would take traffic off of Pruneridge.
So, William, just to let you know that, half those intersections on Stevens Creek are operated and maintained by the city of Santa Clara, and probably another half is maintained by by city of San Jose. We actually share the roadway there on Stevens Creek. So if you're seeing maybe a disconnect, it's mainly most likely because, the city of Santa Clara, we do have our signals timed, but then, as you said, they may be, slightly different than what the city of San Jose has done. But we certainly can talk to you more about that and how we're trying to coordinate with the city of San Jose. And I can definitely chat out my email address, and feel free, you can email me and we can talk further about it, if that works for you.
Thanks
Ryan,
again. William, go ahead.
Ryan, could you chat out my email address?
Great. All right. We've got some questions in the Q&A, and I know, Jonathan, you've been working on a couple of these. Any ones you wanted to address with the folks that are still with us tonight?
Sure. Actually, one specific question about option 3.
Mhm.
And the question was, how are cyclists in option 3 supposed to make left turns? So maybe if you could pull that up for the group to just help answer that question.
Right. So let's see. Can folks see my screen? Let me see if I can get my, that's not it. Just gonna zoom in real quick. So bicyclists wanting to make a left turn in this scenario would proceed into the intersection and make a 2-stage left turn by when the light turns green, crossing and then queuing up in front of the opposing traffic that has a red light, and they can make a left turn there. That's the safest and most, I think, easiest way, and what I think the majority of folks would do. The bicycle lane also could be where the bicyclists can always exit the bicycle lane and mix and merge with traffic to get into the left turn. That's a kind of a difficult maneuver to do. And I think the majority of folks would feel more comfortable, like I mentioned, doing a 2-stage left turn. If folks want to see a follow-up with that, I can maybe share more if you want to ask a follow-up question there. But a good question. Perhaps we can share a little more resources about how that 2-stage left turn would work for bicyclists. Jonathan, more questions that you think we should get to tonight?
I've seen a few questions. I think I've answered a couple of them, but it was generally asking about exploring the addition of bollards or protection.
Right.
In concepts, I guess in any of the concepts.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for concepts 1 and 2, we really can't do anything with vertical protection or bollards or planters or any other options that are available to a parking protected class 4 bikeway. It's what Caltrans calls it, because we need to allow people to park their vehicles next to the curb. So that's why we're just going with the painted buffer here on concept 1 or concept 2. Here, there would be not only the parked vehicles providing that protection, but by Caltrans guidance, there would need to be some sort of physical vertical element. And we aren't calling out what that could look like, but it could be vertical posts. It could be continuous curb along that buffer length there. It could be planters. It could be raised concrete. There's a lot of different looks and feels and budgets that would go into providing that buffer space. Some things that we care about are making sure that the drainage still works and that water can flow from the crown, the middle of the street, down into the gutters and into the storm drains. So having some interruption there. And we also worry about people getting out of their cars and tripping over any sort of barrier. So making sure it's visible and not a tripping hazard. So there's a lot that would have to happen in a design phase. And we're certainly very far from getting into that level of detail here. I think at this stage is just what's the concept, but many jurisdictions in the Bay Area have figured this out and have good lessons that the city could learn from. Well, it is 7:30. I see another hand up, so I'm just going to go to this one. If you've got an opportunity, we're not going to cut anybody off early tonight. So if you've got anything else you want to provide feedback on or ask a follow-up question, go ahead and raise your hand now and we'll cycle through again. So let's see, Alon, you're up.
Hi, thank you. Just a little note for all the questions regarding protected bike lanes. If you guys can head over to McClellan in Cupertino, McClellan Road between De Anza and Stelling, just to see the bike lane, and the left turn in the turn boxes that you just detailed now. It's been implemented there, so you can see it live. Thank you.
Thanks for that information.
Hey, Jeff, this is Mike. Can I say something?
Good. Yeah, Mike, do you want to introduce yourself again? And
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself. I think the team has been doing a great job, and thanks everybody for all your comments. This is really important for us to hear your feedback. That being said, I did want to offer a minor comment related to Stevens Creek. So Stevens Creek's a corridor, as Carol mentioned, that we share jurisdiction with San Jose along Santa Clara's border, and then we also obviously it ties in with Cupertino. So Stevens Creek's a corridor that the jurisdictions have been meeting about in many senses. So more to come on all that ultimately. But that being said, our traffic team is working on some signal timing studies out there in terms of trying to improve signal timing. And then we do have an audience with San Jose in terms of trying to synchronize and connect. I don't know if it's as simple as it all sounds, but I did want to make sure that the community didn't leave this meeting thinking that the cities don't talk, right? Because we do talk on an operational level. We do want to coordinate. Ultimately, it is two cities, but the goal is to really have a corridor that at the end of the day you really wouldn't be able to tell what city you're in ultimately as you're driving up and down it. But there are going to be some differences. So more to come on that. We will respond to the callers' comments and explain it a little bit more in more depth. But just wanted to make sure that was heard tonight. As much as we're talking about Pruneridge, comments about other streets and how that affects the study, those are very welcome, because at the end of the day, it is a full network, right? It's not just one street. So I just wanted to offer that. I think it's there is work being done on Stevens Creek. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Mike's the Assistant Public Works Director for the city, and thank you for being here, Mike. Okay, I don't see anybody else with their hands up. There are, spoke too soon. Hi, Patty, go ahead.
Hi, I'm just gonna say real quick is that, I've had more and more bicyclists rip across 4 lanes and 3 lanes on Kylie and different streets like that. And it's deeply concerning to me that even with bike lanes in certain areas, that they're still ripping across the streets and they don't seem to care about the rules of the road. So I think that my concern is that the Pruneridge designs that you guys make are absolutely fantastic and they're awesome. But the reality is people don't follow the rules of the road, and they do rip through there on bicycles and stuff, unless there's a family, you know, that teaching their kids something. But it deeply concerns me that I feel like the money's going to be wasted doing this when more crosswalks need to be done with lights so that we can stop people from running across the roads and stuff like that. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks for those feedback and that comment and for being here tonight. Okay. All right. Oh. Patty, do you have anything else? Or maybe I just forgot to lower your hand. Okay, I think it's all good. Okay. Other questions? Other comments from folks?
Hey, all right, Jeff or Carol, can you address, there's one, I guess one theme of a few questions. And it was just about how the traffic analysis was done since there was COVID, and then maybe specifically about how the section between Lawrence and San Tomas is a little bit different than the section west of Lawrence to Apple or east of Winchester. But I guess just, you know, both of them kind of just ask about the details of the traffic analysis and how we took that into consideration to identify if there were any impacts.
Guessing you're pulling up that slide, right, Jeff? I
Yes,
didn't.
right. Right there. I think I'll start here. Carol, do you want to go through this or do you want me to go through it again?
Yeah, you know, we had heard that this was like a big concern, not only to residents, but to council. And we actually were delayed in starting this project because council was very concerned about the shelter in place. But what we really did is, to begin with this traffic analysis, was luckily we had historical counts, as you can see on this slide, for many of the intersections, and all these traffic counts were collected before COVID began. So we use that as a benchmark, and we collected all new counts at all the 25 intersections. And so what we really did was we compared the historical counts that we had compared to the 2021 counts, and we were able to see like what percentage difference there were between post-COVID and pre-COVID. And as the slide is showing, in the AM peak hour, there was like a drop in volumes about 63%. And then in the PM peak hour, 42%. So any new counts that we collected where we didn't have historical data, we bumped those traffic volumes up based on these percentages here you see in the slide. So we wanted to ensure that, you know, the data that we were working with represented closer to what we had seen pre-COVID. So we definitely, you know, took some time to figure out how we were going to do that. And this was, you know, the best way we found to do that and to have a really good traffic analysis for this project.
Jonathan, do you think that addresses the commenter, the question?
Yeah, that's a great job. Thanks.
Okay. And again, if folks aren't satisfied with our answers and want to clarify, our email address is hopefully been on the screen, but I'll go to it one more time. Oops. I think I've exited
out of it.
I've exited out of it. Went too fast. Well, Ben can share that out to the group again. And at this point, I just want to say thank you to everybody that participated. If you know folks near residents or neighbors who weren't able to attend tonight, let them know about our event coming up this weekend. That is going to happen, a very repeat of this. And so if your question wasn't answered and you want to come back, we'll be doing an encore presentation Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Thank you all for being here tonight. Appreciate your time and energy, and have a wonderful evening. And we'll be in touch real soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.